Previously, on Mariando pelo Mundo.
What do we want? What do we want? Where do we want it? Mile 5! We're here! The island!
Viajar? Bora, valeu, partiu! A vida é uma viagem, simbora viajar!
Qual ônibus será que é esse aqui? Achei o busão, gente, aquele ali.
Nunca acordei tão cedo. A lua tá linda aqui e é 6 e pouca da manhã, quase 7, 6h50. Olha o cara limpando. O negócio é frenético. Eu vou fazer uma tour hoje pra Belfast. É tipo o negócio dos gigantes. Vou mandar uma foto aí. Tem um negócio onde o Titanic foi construído também. Vai ser muito legal. No ônibus tem Wi-Fi, tô usando até o ônibus Wi-Fi. Tô esperando aqui fora. O ônibus tá ali. Tem uma galerinha ali. Eu só volto à noite, então se eu perder o contato comigo, tá tudo bem, tá?
Câmera, ação! Não é um filme, é a história real. E sabe como ela pode virar realidade? É só ter um pau de selfie, coragem no coração, juntar uma grana, se planejar e partir viagem. Então, tô indo pra Belfast. Quer saber onde fica? Então vem comigo! Eu sempre quis falar isso.
Porque o perrengue a gente nunca esquece, tô quase chorando. Eu saí pelo lado errado do negócio e não vi o ônibus tá do lado de cá. Ai, misericórdia, o que eu vou fazer na minha vida? Aqui é pound, né? Nem eu. Ai, Jesus, que nervoso. Fiquei tão feliz de ver esse cachorrinho. Yeah. Thank you.
Where's everybody from? Philippines, nurses? I don't know. And
Spain.
Espanol? Germany, Deutsche?
Brazil.
Where?
Brazil.
Brazil. If you're from Brazil, you've got to be very careful here.
Yeah?
Yeah, I know a girl that came here 30 years ago on holiday, and she never left because she married my brother. Gotta watch, you'll not get out. Brazilians and Filipinos never get to get away. Guys, you're very welcome to both Belfast and to the Titanic, okay? You're going to do 4 floors and 9 galleries, okay?
What's so special about Mr. Ishmael's ships then? Luxury, James. That's the marketplace starlight. Luxury, elegance. The better sort of expected. It's minimum dated. And that's why they're going to build it bigger still. Did you hear that?
came in here the day after my 14th birthday. Harland and Wolf. That's where you worked in Belfast. My dad got me my start. Then my brothers after me. You could hear the noise from where we lived, but nothing prepared you for the size of the place.
They put me to work on 401. That's what we called her. We knew she'd be the largest passenger ship in the world, but we didn't call her Titanic then.
I was there from the beginning. I watched the shipwrights lay the keel blocks. They set big wooden blocks on the slipway to start with. Then the keel at top of that, like a backbone. And the frames attached to that, like a skeleton.
Workshops everywhere. It took weeks to find your way around. There'd be workshops for every trade you ever heard of. Painters, sailmakers, coppersmiths, boiler makers, cabinet makers. I even learned a bit about French polishing off them.
Helloooooo was a fine place to work, but dangerous. Every ship cost a life, and there'd be lots of injuries besides.
I was in the engine works for a while. Very well equipped it was. That's where we built the triple expansion engines. 2 of them, each as high as a 3-story house.
I worked in the frame bending shop. You had heat steel beams in the furnace, then hook them onto slabs of cast iron and hammer them curved. It was skilled work. You had to bend them more than you needed because the frame straightened out a little when it cooled.
The shell plates that made up the hull weighed up to 4.5 tons. They were taller than the da.
The plates were overlapped on the edges. Some were raised, one after another. We called it clincher. One of the foremen taught me years ago. That's how you built steel ships.
I worked as a heater boy. You had to heat the rivets on a wee plate. You pump the bellows till the rivet was white hot. Then you get a hold of it with your tongs and throw it up to the catcher. And he put it in the hole in the plate with the holder up.
There were 2 of us on the other side of the plate with the holder up. We had to hammer the rivet so it filled the hole before it turned dull red.
The double bottom. That's a wee space we called the tanks, made up of steel plates. The rest of the rivet squad all had to fit into that gap.
One of the foremen would check each rivet with a special hammer. If it made a ringing sound, we'd have to go back and chase it out after work.
I'd get scared working down in that double bottom. You only had candles for light.
And the constant hammering against the shell plates. You could hear it all over Belfast. Some of those boys ended up stone deaf, so they did. We were paid 31 bob a week. The heater boy and catcher got 16 bob. But we all worked the same 54 hours.
The upper deck was steel too, and part of the strength of the ship. There's no straight lines in a ship, and when you look down the other deck, you can see the shear of the hull, the stop for reflection at sea.
The stern frame had to be strong enough to take the rudder turning in heavy seas. You'd have all these timbers and guy wires to steady the frame, and men scurrying around like ants underneath.
When we came to launch day, I was torn between pride and fear. The standing ways were coated in tallow, train oil and soft soap. So the ship would slide when they shifted her weight off the blocks. That was the most dangerous part. And the shipwrights were knocking away the last props. They were under compression, you see, and the sliding ways would be released by the hydraulic trigger.
100,000 people watched the launch. Some paid a bob to sit in the reserved seating. There were extra trams laid on. Then we all went off to the pub to wish her well.
Doc, you were proud to be an island man that day. And Titanic was the pride of Belfast.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank
The
you
tour
so
will
much.
end in on the slipway. These were made of pitch pine and were stacked about 4 feet high with angled wedges on top. On these were laid the first steel plates. The plates were strengthened on the bottom by a flat slab keel bar, which protected the bottom of the ship. top of the steel plates, a 6-foot-high solid spine was laid, which ran the length of the ship and was known as the vertical keel. The vertical keel had a rigid rib of plates which ran along its spine. At the base was Titanic's double bottom. Here the hull was made up of 2 layers of steel plates, in some cases forming enclosed tanks and coal bunkers. The deck beams were made steel, which were then plated over to form the decks. The exterior decks were clad in yellow pine and caulked so they remained waterproof. The decks were arched, known as camber, so that any water would run to the channel waterway and drain overboard. The wooden decks were mostly laid in pine and were secured to the steel plating beneath by bolts. The decking ran lengthways parallel to the centre line of the ship. Building Titanic was a feat of engineering. Harland and Wolff employed 15,000 men at that time, many of whom worked on Titanic over the 26 months it took to construct the hull for launch. At the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, there was a 6,000-ton structure which was over 200 feet high. It was known as the Aral Gantry. The gantry was constructed to house 2 massive ships that were being built for the White Star Line. It supported the giant cranes that lifted materials and equipment into the ship's hull using steel and rope slings made on-site by the yard's rigging teams. Housed in the Aral Gantry was a Harland and Wolff ship with yard number 401. It became known the world over as Titanic, the largest passenger liner in the world. Building Titanic was a feat of engineering. Harland and Wolff employed 15,000 men at that time, many of whom worked on Titanic over the 26 months it took to construct the hull for launch. The shell plates of the hull of Titanic at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, there was a 6,000-ton structure which was over 200 feet high. It was known as the Aral Gantry. The gantry was constructed to house 2 massive ships that were being built for the White Star Line. It supported the giant cranes that lifted materials into the ship's hull using steel and rope slings on-site by the yard's rigging teams. Housed in the Aral Gantry was a Harland and Wolff ship with yard number 401. The deck beams were made steel, which were then plated over to form the deck liners. The exterior decks were clad in yellow pine, caulked so they remained waterproof.
Fazendo o mundo ficar menor. Mais de 20 palavras por minuto, meu povo. navio inteligente cresceu, em estatura, graça e cor, na distância silenciosa e sombria, cresceu o iceberg também. Sikidia, é o mesmo que SOS. Nós atingimos um iceberg. Estamos afundando. Sim, o iceberg estava no radar. Eles foram avisados, só que não deram ideia. E isso custou vidas. Mais de 2.200 pessoas estavam a bordo, mas apenas cerca de 700 sobreviveram. O Titanic tinha 2 irmãos, o Olympic e o Britannic. A história desses navios fornece insights interessantes sobre como a história do Titanic poderia ter se desenvolvido se ele não tivesse afundado. O Titanic foi construído em 1909. Deixa eu falar. Até 1911. Belfast foi o ponto de partida do Titanic em sua viagem inaugural. A capital da Irlanda do Norte também era sede da empresa do setor de construção naval, responsável pela criação do Titanic. Quando você olhar para a fachada do museu, o que ela te remete? Já te digo logo, ela lembra a proa do navio e também o iceberg que afundou. Afundou em 15 de abril de 1912, no meio do Oceano Atlântico. Atualmente ele encontra-se perto do Canadá. E só foi possível achá-lo 73 anos depois do seu naufrágio. Sala de controle. Belfast de amanhã. Thank you, muitas gracias, arigato, obrigada.
Esse aqui foi o Titanic Museum. É lindo, gente. Sozinha.
Every night in my dreams, I see you, I feel you. That is how I know you. Go on. Far across the distance and spaces between us, you have come to show you. Go on. You're here. There's nothing up here, and I know that my heart will go on. We'll stay forever this way. You are safe in my heart, and my heart will go on. Viajar? Bora, valeu, partiu! A vida é uma viagem. Simbora viajar!